Hello everyone, I'm Brian. Today I'm reacting to Self-Discovery in Advaita Vedanta, Story of the Confused Lion. So, from Swami Tadatmananda. I think I stuttered there. So again, this is interesting one. I've not heard of the story of, obviously, but the confused lion. I couldn't find the thumbnail, but it's a thumbnail of a sheep looking in a mirror, and inside the mirror is the lion. And interesting enough, we had a video that I reacted to relatively recently that talked about a mirror instead of looking at the reflection of the mirror becoming one with the mirror. So this one has a mirror in it. So anyways, let's go ahead and get started.
There is a delightful Vedantic story about a lioness and her little cub. Once upon a time, while they were traveling through the jungle, the cub became fascinated with a butterfly and didn't notice that his mother had walked on. After he stopped playing around, he couldn't find his mother anywhere. He felt dreadfully afraid, alone in the dark, scary jungle. And he missed his mother. All night long, the little cub waited for his mother to return. In the morning, he saw a herd of sheep grazing in a nearby clearing. Feeling sad and lonely, he approached the herd, seeking comfort. The cub was still too young to fully appreciate the difference between lions and sheep, and even though sheep are usually afraid of lions, the cub was so small and helpless that he was readily accepted into the herd. This wonderful parable has been told by countless teachers of Vedanta. It was a favorite of the famous Hindu monk Swami Vivekananda, who exhorted his listeners to metaphorically roar like lions. Stories like this get adapted to facilitate whatever is being taught at the time. Those of you familiar with the lion story will find an interesting addition here in my version, towards the end. The cub's loneliness and feelings of abandonment were eased somewhat in the company of the sheep. Sadly, the lioness never returned. The orphaned cub remained with the herd and grew up amongst the sheep. As he lived with them over the months and years, the sheep came to accept him as one of their own. He gradually learned their ways and even started to bleat like them.
I will say, obviously, it's not a realistic story because lions eat meat and sheep eat grass. and I'm just thinking the technicalities of this, but that's just me.
Not surprisingly, the little lion cub grew up thinking that he was a sheep. This story uses a powerful analogy to illustrate the problem of ignorance, a particular kind of ignorance that can be called self-non-recognition. The lion considered himself a weak, defenseless sheep due to ignorance of his true nature as king of the jungle. Whenever the herd was threatened by a passing predator, the lion would tremble in fear and run for safety, like the sheep. The sheep's fear was well-founded, because sheep are a favorite food for many predators. But the lion suffered from fear unnecessarily, due to his ignorance, due to self-non-recognition. Just like the cub grew up with ignorance of his true lionly nature, we too start our lives with ignorance of our true divine nature. We fail to recognize ourselves as unchanging, limitless consciousness, Atma, eternal, full, and complete. And due to this self-non-recognition, we consider ourselves to be mortal, limited beings, subject to the afflictions of our bodies and minds, even though none of that can truly threaten the innate fullness of Atma. When we fail to recognize our immortal, limitless true nature, we identify with our mortal bodies and limited minds, just like the lion considered himself a weak, defenseless sheep. And just like the lion suffered due to ignorance, so do we. One day, many years later, another lion was passing through the jungle and happened to see the herd of sheep grazing in the clearing. Standing amongst the sheep was a lion, grazing on the grass like the sheep. The passing lion was dumbfounded by this incongruous sight. As he moved closer to get a better look, the sheep sensed his presence and ran off in fear for their lives. And of course, the ignorant lion also ran off in fear. Seeing all this, the passing lion became extremely curious. So he chased after the ignorant lion to find out what was going on. The ignorant lion climbed up a tree where he trembled in fear and begged, "Please don't hurt me. Please don't eat me." The passing lion said, "Why would I eat you?" The ignorant lion replied, "Because I'm a sheep and lions eat sheep." The passing lion said, "But you're not a sheep, you're a lion." To which the ignorant lion replied, "How can I be a lion?"
My question for this one is, again, thinking way too much into the story and trying to be a little bit too logical with it, but also trying to reason it a little bit. The sheer fact that, obviously we can see ourselves and we can see if we are different from other people or other animals, you could say. So, in this case, other animals. So we can say, oh man, I mean, I don't look like a monkey. I don't have as much hair. I mean, I have hair, but not as much hair. I'm not like fully covered. So why am I different from, like, if I was raised with monkeys? It's like, why am I different from everyone else? Even if I could talk, say, communicate with other monkeys, say like chimpanzees or something. I'm like, why am I taller than them, but not as strong? Why why is my hair not grown out? I can tell there's something different about me. So that's probably, and I'm trying to think of that, how would I turn that into an Advaita Vedanta type of thinking, which is, this is when we start looking inwards, looking down at our bodies. It's like looking inwards, where we're starting to see there's something different. Our, differentiating from the sheep or our body to the lion, our true selves, Atman. So when he looks down, it's like, yeah, like, for example, these two, the lion looks down and says, "Oh, I have claws like you. I have a mane like you. I move like you. I have a tail like you." Where sheep don't really have tails. So that's whenever that's becoming, I guess, enlightened to a degree, at least starting to know their true selves. Again, thinking too much into it, but at the same time trying to logically explain it. So looking at himself, he can tell that it's different. That's kind of looking inwards. Looking at his body, it's like looking inwards, I guess, in terms of Advaita Vedanta. And then realizing your true self, that, oh, I'm not a sheep, I'm a lion, is becoming enlightened, I believe. So I guess that's my issue. It's like I always try to think of it logically. Whenever I give examples out there, it has to try to be as one to one as much as possible. Whereas most examples are just the idea is the main thing, and it doesn't have to make logical sense, I think, or too logical sense.
Let's pause here to appreciate the story better. The ignorant lion's concept of his own identity was thoroughly conditioned by his many years of living with the sheep. His ignorance had become deeply ingrained, and as a result, even when he heard the truth, "You're not a sheep, you're a lion," his wrong conclusion about himself was not dispelled. It continued unabated. In the same way, we've all grown up with the notion that we are mortal, limited beings, subject to the afflictions of our bodies and minds. That ignorance, too, is deeply ingrained. And as a result, when we hear the truth, "You're not your body, you're not your mind, pure consciousness is your true nature," even then our ignorance remains. It persists somehow. In spite of the fact that knowledge destroys ignorance, merely hearing about the truth of our divine nature can fail to remove our wrong conclusions, even when it's clearly expressed.
Well, because I guess, hold on, let me rewind that part.
Hearing about the truth of our divine nature can fail to remove our wrong conclusions.
Well, because I would assume is that, you don't, just because you hear about something, that doesn't mean you automatically believe it. You need proof or evidence of it. And that's fair enough, a lot of people aren't just going to believe in something.
Even when it's clearly expressed. To understand why, let's return to the story. When the ignorant lion said, "How can I be a lion?" the passing lion said, "Come down, and I'll show you that you're a lion. Don't worry, I promise that I won't eat you." He gave a small mirror to the ignorant lion and said, "Look at your reflection. Do you look like a sheep, or do you look like me?" The ignorant lion was stunned by what he saw. "I'm not a sheep. I'm a lion. I'm the king of the jungle." He thanked the passing lion again and again for removing his wrong notions, and he strutted off into the jungle boldly, knowing full well that he was at the top of the food chain. No predators could harm him.
Again, thinking too logically, this, except for other lions.
Notice that merely hearing the words, "You're a lion," wasn't enough to remove his deeply ingrained ignorance. Rather than merely being told the truth, he needed to be shown the truth.
This is exactly what I mean. Like, people. The problem is that there are liars in the world. So merely someone stating something, you should never just automatically believe it. Hear them out for sure, and maybe they are telling the truth, but you don't know that for sure. I mean, being lied to can be something that's very, very risky because it could put your life on the line or other people's lives on the line. It's the reason why we don't just believe. We have to be it has to be proven to be true, and that's where one end of the spectrum is just believe what people say, to the other spectrum to where I need proof without a shadow of a doubt, which is pretty extreme, both extremes, and where we all lie somewhere in between there, where maybe it's not quite here, but maybe one step forward. So, for example, like, I don't quite believe that I am a lion, and you just like, here, look at my tail and look at your tail. It just says, like, that's proof enough for me. But not realizing that there are dogs out there that has tails, there's cats out there that has tails, but just a tail alone is proof enough. Or maybe the next one in line is, oh, the mane, not realizing that there are maybe I don't know how to explain the main, but if you get what I'm saying, it's just maybe a little bit more and more and more and more, and to the point to where it's like I have to dissect you open and whatever else, crazy proof. And everyone's going to be a little bit different in terms of those two extreme spectrums. How much information do you need to be shown, or how much proof do you need to be shown where you believe it, where it's become not a belief in your mind but a fact?
By looking into the mirror. That mirror represents the teachings of Vedanta, a mirror in the form of words. When we look into the mirror of Vedanta, we can see our true divine nature reflected there. We can see ourselves completely independent of our bodies and minds, and utterly unaffected by their afflictions. In this way, the teachings of Vedanta don't tell us the truth, they show us the truth of our own nature. They destroy our deeply ingrained ignorance and free us from suffering due to identification with our bodies and minds. But our story isn't over quite yet. As night fell, the lion stretched out on the jungle floor and slept soundly. He no longer needed the companionship and security of living with a herd of sheep. The next morning, he awoke and saw the sheep grazing in the clearing as usual. Having just woken up, he was drowsy, I suppose, and he walked towards the herd purely out of habit. He joined them and started grazing on the grass again, as he had done for so many years. The passing lion was still in the vicinity and happened to see all this. As he approached the herd, the sheep scattered in fear, but the lion remained there, having remembered that he was a lion. The passing lion asked him, "Why are you still living with the sheep and grazing on the grass?" He replied, "I guess it's just a habit." Habits can be very powerful and surprisingly tenacious. Even though the lion clearly knew that he was a lion, his habitual sheepish behavior and thinking continued nonetheless. In the same way, even after we discover our true nature to be eternal and limitless, our habitual wrong notions of being mortal and limited can continue. False identification with our bodies and minds can persist purely out of habit. So, Vedanta must address not only the problem of self-non-recognition, but it must also address this further problem of habitual wrong thinking. Self-non-recognition is removed by the practice called Shravana, which is listening to a qualified teacher unfold the teachings of Vedanta clearly and methodically, enabling us to see our true nature reflected in the word mirror of Vedanta. But Shravana itself can't remove our habitual wrong thinking. Another kind of practice is required, and that practice is called nididhyasana, contemplation, which is specifically intended to remove any lingering identification with our bodies and minds. The last part of the story shows how this works. To help the lion overcome his habitual wrong thinking, the passing lion gave him a mirror and said, "Be sure to look at your reflection each morning before you do anything else." Every morning thereafter, when the lion looked at his reflection, he didn't see or learn anything new. but by repeatedly seeing his true nature reflected with all its power and majesty as king of the jungle, his habitual sheepish behavior gradually faded away. The lion needed to see himself in the mirror again and again to remove his habitual identification with being a sheep. In the same way, after gaining self-knowledge, we need to look into the word mirror of Vedanta again and again to remove every last trace of our own habitual wrong thinking. And when we are totally free from any residual identification with our bodies and minds, we will enjoy complete, unfettered liberation, moksha.
Okay. I guess if I was looking at this from many different kind of critical thinking perspective, my issue would be for this is the fact that a mirror doesn't tell you anything. It literally doesn't say or do anything other than what it does, which is just reflect what is in front of it essentially. Whereas when you look, because I mean, the way I looked at this is like if it's, let's look at the, say, Western religions. The Western religion Bibles will tell you, this is the truth, and you just have to keep reading it, and to believe it. You read it enough to believe it. It's kind of like how you look into a mirror long enough to believe it. But the difference is a mirror doesn't tell you anything. It just reflects what's in front of it. So the truth, essentially, or let me say, I don't know, say if the truth is the correct word for it, but let's say it reflects whatever's in front of it, whether it's the truth or not, I suppose. It has no intent of lying, but if whatever's shown to it's a liar, then it will show a liar. So, um, for example, I guess like if you like I was thinking of a great example for this. I was thinking like of a pen, but a pen's not going to change colors in the reflection of a mirror. But there are trick puzzles that if you angle the mirror right, looks like something like the one I thought of was like if you angle a mirror properly, you look at the mirror and the object looks square. But when you turn it like basically 180, the bottom side to the top, it'll become a circle. That's because of the angle of the reflection. So the mirror is not lying to you, but because of how it's angled, it looks like one thing, and then when you turn it, it looks like another. So the mirror never intends to lie, but it's just what's shown and how it's shown. It's whether it, what you see. Where so that's the reason why I say it doesn't tell the truth. But then again, the mirror doesn't have any intention whatsoever to lie or not to lie. It just shows what it shows. So if you look at it head on without any trickery, kind of like that trick puzzle, then it will show you what it sees. Well, sees. Whereas if you look at books and stuff, it can lie. It can tell you whatever it wants to tell you, and if you read it enough, you can believe it. You can believe it to be true. That would be an argument against, say, something like any kind of books. Um, because there are people out there who have read books and done crazy things because they believed it. And I know a lot of people out there says, well, it's supposed to tell you the truth. Well, that's what all religion does too, you know. So at the same time, for me, I like to try to explain it in a practical or logical, if at all, possible way, because I do believe in your true self. And so, for example, your consciousness is your true self. Your brain, people in the Western world might think, oh, your brain or your mind is your true self. I was like, well, not really, because I can kind of logically explain this. Your mind is literally just a storage system. It's where your memories come from. It's where your ideas come from. But your true self that makes that decision, I'm just talking not in terms of Advaita Vedanta here. I'm just talking about how I can kind of logically explain it in terms of not even including Advaita Vedanta, is that what part of you is the decision maker? It's not, it's, they say mind, but where is the mind at? The mind is an idea, like consciousness in a lot of sense. The brain is, well, it's a like a CPU, well, like a CPU in a sense that it has a lot of parts that you don't control. It's a lot of automation telling your body what to do. There are storage memories, processes that happen there for sure. But where is this mind or consciousness at? You know, that's if you see mind and consciousness as one and the same, that's fine. Your mind brings up the past, like your memory and stuff and ideas. It operates the brain, you could say, and that's where you get your ideas from what your memory hasn't stored. So if you remember about a pen and paper, it's like, oh, I can write stuff down. I know a pen writes, and I know paper takes ink very well. So you could look at that as one and the same in terms of non-advaita right there. Um, and to me, again, I've said this many times before that the only difference between Advaita Vedanta and my thoughts and things is where your true self is at. And in terms of Advaita Vedanta, your true self is existence. There is only that. Whereas for me, we all have our individual, you could say, individual consciousness. But outside of that, all the so far as I know, all the ideas are the similar, if not the same. You still want to know your true self. Your true self is not the body. The body is more like a like a robot. But I mean, don't get me wrong. You still feel the pain and all that. And pain is intended to let you know, warn you of damage and stuff. It's very important to have pain. So it's not like, you become painless or emotionless. All these functions for survival purposes. You need pain to know that you're hurt somewhere. You need emotions to know that you're causing someone else pain. And the reason for that is for communities, civilization. Because if everyone doesn't care for anyone else, then civilization itself or group doesn't quite function because there's no group activity. Everyone's kind of selfish a little bit. So having like I guess you could say like shaming a little bit to some degree is a form of what do you call it? In a sense, group activity or group mentality, meaning that if something's looked upon shamefully, people generally won't do that because they want to be accepted by the group. I talked a lot there. But I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. Again, my mind just thinks of many different things in many different ways, and I need to think of things logically, generally speaking, and a way to explain things so that it makes sense, so that I can understand it, and hopefully other people understand it. So I guess, and like I said, the only issue I have here is the fact that a mirror has no intent whatsoever, whereas books or religion in general has an intent and has an intent that is for you to believe it because it has words in it and it's trying to convince you to believe it. Whereas a mirror has no words, it has no intent, it has no mind or no one. I don't want to say didn't create it because books are written and mirrors obviously are created. But if you look at a water, no one really created water per se. You look at a pond, you can see your reflection. I guess that would have made more logical sense than a mirror. It's like, here, hold this mirror up, lion. Or the lion says, come here, look in the pond and look at your reflection. Do you look like me? So I guess a pond would have been a bit better, more. But again, I'm thinking way too much into the story. But nonetheless, the story and the pond and all that still, makes all the sense in the world. So reflection in the mirror, while the mirror does have an intent because it was created for a purpose, much like books. But a pond, well, people can create ponds, but a naturally occurring pond, or they can't control the water. They can't say turn off the reflection on the water. You can't. People can't do that. A water's going to reflect as long as there's light, of course. So, and it will reflect whatever it sees, much like a mirror. Not as good as a mirror, but it will still reflect. So I hope you understand the general idea that I have going there. And if you have anything to say about it, I mean, I don't mind me. I mean, go ahead and say it in the comments, and I'd be kind of curious because I'm definitely open-minded. That open-minded doesn't mean I just believe. Open-minded means I'm willing to hear people out. Um, that doesn't mean I'm going to believe you, but you could make a compelling argument. Um, and I will say about the meat versus vegetarian, we got pretty heated a little bit, and I want to create a video on that so bad because they made compelling arguments, but not convincing arguments. And in my opinion, I have more convincing arguments than the compelling arguments. So, anyways, that's my reaction to Self-Discovery and Vedanta story of the confused lion, which, by the way, the image is of what looks like a real sheep and a real lion in the mirror, not cartoonish drawings. So, if you like my content, please consider subscribing, thumbs up the sound down below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next vid.